The haircut I'm working on here is a short shag with a mullet and a pre-existing micro fringe. I'm going to be utilizing my razor as well as my scissors. Starting in the nape area, I'm using my razor with one of my favorite weight removal techniques, which is skimming. Skimming is an amazing technique if executed properly. There's just a lot of key factors you want to keep in mind. Um, it's a very delicate and patient technique. The more you're trying to rush through it, the chances are the rougher your outcome is going to be. You don't want to use, I'm using very little pressure on that blade. Actually, it's really mostly just the weight of the blade itself on the surface of the hair. I'm using very little elevation as well as very little tension. Again, it's a very delicate technique. Really, if done properly, the the only hair that's being cut is hair in between the guard of the razor. And what that's going to achieve is if you use too much downward pressure, what's going to happen is you're going to create a lot of short bits on the surface of your section, which is going to create graduation, which is a buildup of weight, which is the opposite of what we're trying to achieve. So taking down my next subsection here, again, you notice that the sections are a little bit thicker than you may normally take with, say, scissors. And the reason being is if you take too fine of a section with this technique, you could wind up taking off too much hair too quickly, and then you get more of a chunk. Another common mistake that I see people make, it's not necessarily wrong, but there's tendencies that come with it, which is lifting the blade off the surface of the hair in the upstroke. So if you notice, the blade does not leave the surface of the hair in the upward or downward stroke. It remains in contact. The tendency that happens is if you lift the blade up off the surface of the hair in the upward stroke, when you could come down at a severe angle and take a big chunk out of that section. Another thing I'm not doing is I'm not rotating the blade at a 45-degree angle to the hair shaft. What that's actually going to do is that's actually going to shred the cuticle layer off the surface of the hair. So that edge of the blade is pointed directly down that hair shaft. Again, the more you can find a nice rhythm to this movement, the smoother your outcome is going to be. You want to essentially, again, you don't want to create any short bits on the surface of your section. You want all those short bits to be in the interior, so it creates more of a seamless weight removal. You want that hair to just feel like it's kind of melting off the ends. It almost has a one length feel to your end result if done well. At this point, I'm going to isolate that bottom section just to keep everything nice and clean as I work through the mid portion of the head of my haircut. And at this point, I'm actually going to use my scissors. These are the Mizutani Penslims. I absolutely love these scissors. They are, I use them, I find myself using them a lot. They're just, I love the narrowness of the blade. It's very slim, and they just cut like butter. So I'm just taking a rough measurement. The bottom of that section, I want to fall into the nape area. So I want to, again, we've collapsed the shape into the nape area by removing that weight. Now I want the bottom of that section to fall over the occipital and into the nape area. Again, it's going to really create a really strong, beautiful profile. I'm using vertical sections, convex layering, working with the round of the head, which is going to give me the maximum amount of weight removal. I'm not using any over direction. I am using a traveling guide, so I'm taking a sliver of my previous section before I take my new section and just making sure I can clearly see my guide before I make a cut. Measure twice, cut once. Continuing working around the head, vertical sections, no over direction, all the way through to the hairline. And then at this point, you want to do a simple cross check. We were cutting this with vertical sections, subsections, so now I'm going to take a horizontal subsection just to check, cross check, make sure there's no surprises at the end of my haircut. At this point, you can do you could do slight cleanups, but you really don't. If you've gone longer or shorter at this point, you want to go back in at your shorter or longer point with vertical sections and go back through that haircut. Returning to the back of the head, and where I'm going to continue my vertical sections, 0 over direction, and work my way around to the other side of the hairline. When I reach behind the ear, I'm just going to simply check for balance. Again, make sure I don't make it through that other side and I've gone longer or shorter. Just make sure I'm on track. Again, a simple horizontal cross check just to make sure I'm on the right track. Now at this point in the haircut, I'm actually going to pick up my razor again, and what I'm trying to achieve here is I'm going to do another form of skimming, but I'm going to create a little bit of a more of a curved motion. And what I want to achieve here is I want to open up space around that ear area. So I have a bit more pressure on the heel of the blade and creating more of a C shape, crescent moon shape motion. More of a carving, curved cutting. And I'm going to mirror that same technique behind the ear, but instead I'm going to have a little more pressure on the toe of the blade. Again, really just to open up that space around the ear area. It's going to give the haircut a lot of definition and differentiate from front to back. Help give that mullet its glory day in the sun. I'm going to mimic that same technique on the other side. The only thing that's really going to change here is because I'm working on the other side, I am now working in front of the ear. I have my triangle shaped section. Now I'm going to have pressure on the toe of the blade, where on the other side, because we're standing on the other side of the head, the pressure was on the heel of the blade. So again, opening up that ear area, carving, movement. You can take that section, how high you want that triangle section. I have it about an 1.5 to 2 inches above the peak of the ear, at the hairline. You can take that as high as you want, just depends on how much, I don't want to lose the integrity of my haircut, I just want to open up some space. So at this point I can drop down that bottom section, and just to see how the top and my first and second section marry together, start to see the texture develop. I'm working wet to dry, so some of the moisture's left the hair. I can start to see the movement and where I want, maybe some more texture or weight removal taken out. See how the haircut's coming to life at this point. Now I'm working my way up to the top section, and I'm taking a central vertical section down the center of the head, and I'm using that micro fringe as my guide. And I'm working shorter from that short length of my micro fringe, working longer, and I'm going to connect that to the top portion of my middle section. So I'm working my way back, and I'm just going to simply make that connection to the top of my middle portion of the haircut. And from here, I'm going to continue taking those vertical sections across the top of the head. And I am using a traveling guide. So I'm working from the center out towards the round of the head. I stand to choose. I like to stand on this side of the head. I'm going to stand on the same side of the head as I work the entire top section, so that I'm cutting from front to back. So the tip of my scissors are pointed in the direction that I'm cutting. So I'm going to stand, even when I do both sides of the head, I'm going to stay on the same side of the body. Stand on the same side of the head. As you work your way towards the round of the head, you're going to make that connection from the top to the middle portion. A simple cross check here. Make sure everything, again, making sure we're on track. We don't have any surprises at the end of our haircut. Now at this point, as I start my blow dry, I've re-wet the hair a little bit, add a little more moisture back into the hair because it's almost totally dry at that point. I'm starting with a flat wrap technique, wrap dry, flat wrap, whichever we want to call it. I refer to this as a soft wrap. And what that is there's no nozzle, there's no directional nozzle on my blow dryer. The blow dryer is about 6 to 12 inches away from the head. And I'm using my flat brush and long sweeping motions, utilizing the roundness of the head as a tool to help flatten, smooth, and most importantly, neutralize root direction. So with a soft wrap, my main focus is the roots, neutralizing root direction. And once the hair is usually anywhere between 50 and 70% dry, depending on how short that hair is. Again, this haircut, there's not a lot of length to it, so you could flat wrap this whole thing. I'm switching to what I refer to as a hard wrap. So I'm choosing to use my comb here. In a hard wrap, I'm utilizing the directional nozzle, and the blow dryer is following directly behind my tool. Changing directions for a little added tension. It's going to be nice smoothness and shine. Now, this is going to give me a really smooth, flat iron-like effect without actually using the flat iron. So this is just a personal preference of mine. I choose not to use the flat iron as a cutting tool because it actually changes the texture of the hair, makes the hair more condensed and feel finer, and can give me a misreading of any bit of extra texturizing or weight removal I do after that. So I'm using the Mizutani baby leaf scissors, and I actually really love these. They are designed to be a dry cutting scissor. They don't have to only exclusively be dry cutting, but they do work really well for this slide cutting technique that I'm doing here. They're really, the compact design is great to work around the face, work around the ear area, and they give me a lot of control of my weight removal. They have a really soft, delicate way of removing hair. So slide cutting, just simply going into areas that I want to create a little more space, a little more open space, a little added texture and weight removal. So really just get the most out of my haircut. So at this point, I'm using the GHD Platinum Plus styler, and I'm going to create just a soft S-wave pattern in those longest bits of my shape, just to create some nice movement and added texture in my end styling. And I'm feeding the hair into the flat iron. So if the flat iron stays pretty much in place, and I'm just creating bends and feeding the hair into the flat iron and just lightly tapping my way towards the ends. And again, I'm doing horizontal and vertical sections with that flat iron texturizing technique. Now I'm going to be using dark oil as a styling tool on dry hair, and there's so many benefits to dark oil. I love the consistency of it. It's got more of a liquid gel consistency to it rather than a typical oil. And I can use it very liberally because the technology in it allows it partially dissipates off the surface of the hair. It penetrates the hair shaft, has a lot of really great conditioning qualities, but partially dissipates off the surface, so I can really use that product liberally. And the more I work it into the hair, the more it just it dissipates, and it's not going to get oily or greasy or build up. I can put it into the root area, really work it in well, without a greasy, over-producty or pomade effect. So I know we can all play and push and pulling the hair, and we can play all day styling once we get our hands in hair. But sometimes you got to know when to call it a day, call it quits. And then really the only thing left to do after that is kick her out.